Story 3. My name is Marcus, and I'm a fishing guide on the Sangha River in the Central African Republic. I'm 51 years old, been doing this work since I was 17, same as my father and his father before him. The river is my life. I know every bend, every sandbar, every deep pool where the big Nile perch hide. I've seen hippos overturn boats, crocodiles take goats from the bank, all manner of dangerous things. I'm not easily frightened, but what happened last November changed everything I thought I knew about the river. I was hired by a French journalist and his photographer. They were doing a story about traditional fishing methods, wanted to spend a week on the river documenting the local communities. Good money, easy work. We'd paddle upstream during the day, camp on sandbars at night, nothing I hadn't done 100 times before. The journalist's name was Philippe. The photographer was called Antoine. Nice enough guys, respectful, didn't complain about the heat or the insects. We'd been out for 3 days and everything was routine. The river was running clear, the weather was good, and we'd gotten them some excellent footage of the net fishermen working the rapids. On the 4th night, we made camp on a sandbar about 40 kilometers upriver from the nearest village. It was a good spot, high enough that we didn't have to worry about crocodiles, with a clear view in all directions. We built a fire, cooked rice and fish, and sat around talking while the sun went down. The Sangha is beautiful at dusk. The water turns copper and gold, and the forest on either bank goes from green to black as the light fades. You can hear the night starting, the frogs beginning their chorus, the bats coming out, the splash of fish rising to feed on insects. Philippe was asking me about river legends, folklore, that kind of thing. He wanted local color for his article. I told him about the Mokombembe, the supposed dinosaur that people claim lives in the deep pools. About the Emelantuka, the water elephant with a horn like a rhino. Tourist stories, mostly. Things the guides tell visitors to make the river seem more mysterious. Do you believe any of it? Philippe asked, camera still rolling for audio. I laughed. I believe in what I can see. Crocodiles are real. Hippos are real. Those will kill you quick enough without needing made-up monsters. Antoine, the photographer, was standing at the edge of the water, taking pictures of the sunset. He called back to us. What about that? He was pointing downriver, where the water curved out of sight around a bend, maybe 200 meters away. There was someone standing in the shallows. At first, I thought it was a fisherman from one of the villages. We weren't that far from civilization, and people do fish at night sometimes. But something felt wrong. The figure was completely still, just standing there knee-deep in the water, facing our direction. Hey, I called out in Sango, waving. Hello. No response. The figure didn't move. Maybe they didn't hear you, Philippe said. But the river was quiet. Sound carries well across water. They should have heard me. I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. That's strange, I muttered, standing up. The figure was hard to see clearly in the fading light. Just a dark silhouette against the reflection on the water. But there was something off about the proportions. The person seemed too tall and too thin. Then they started walking toward us. Not swimming, not wading, walking. Through water that I knew was at least 2 meters deep in that channel. But the figure's head and shoulders stayed above the surface, moving steadily, purposefully in our direction. Marcus, Antoine said quietly. That's not right. No. I agreed, my throat suddenly dry. It's not. The figure kept coming, and as it got closer, I could see more details. It was impossibly tall, at least 3 meters, maybe more. The body was thin to the point of being skeletal, arms hanging down past where the knees should be. The head was wrong too, elongated, with what looked like hair or vegetation hanging down to the shoulders. And it was walking on the river bottom, under water that should have been over its head. Get away from the water, I said sharply. Both of you. Now. We backed away from the shore, and I grabbed a burning branch from the fire. I didn't know what good it would do, but it was the only weapon I had. Philippe and Antoine huddled behind me, Philippe still filming despite his hands shaking. The figure stopped at the edge of our sandbar, maybe 10 meters from where we stood. The water there was only knee-deep, and now we could see it clearly. It was humanoid, but only in the loosest sense. The body was covered in what looked like wet, matted vegetation, river weeds and algae clinging to gray-black skin underneath. The limbs were grotesquely elongated, with joints that bent in too many places. The hands, if you could call them that, had fingers that seemed to go on forever, webbed and ending in black claws. But the face, God, the face. It was mostly featureless, smooth and flat like it had been worn away by water. No nose, just two slits. No ears. But the mouth was a wide gash that split the lower half of the face. And the eyes were huge and bulging, fish-like, with no visible iris or pupil. Just milky white orbs that somehow still gave the impression of staring directly at us. Water poured from its mouth in a continuous stream, like it was full of river water that just kept flowing. It stood there, completely motionless except for that water spilling from its mouth, and it watched us. "What is that?" Philippe whispered. "What the fuck is that?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My entire body was locked up with a primal fear I'd never experienced before. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. We were on a sandbar in the middle of the river. Then it spoke. Not words exactly. It made a sound like water gurgling through a pipe, a wet, bubbling noise that rose and fell in pitch. But underneath that, I could almost hear words. Not French or Sango, something older, something that sounded like the river itself trying to form language. And then, impossibly, the river responded. The water around the sandbar began to rise. Not everywhere, just around us. Like something was pushing it up, creating a wall of water that grew higher with each second. Within moments, the water that had been at the creature's knees was at its waist, then its chest, creeping up the sides of our sandbar. "It's making the river rise," Antoine said, his voice breaking. "How is it making the river rise?" The creature tilted its head, still making that gurgling sound, and the water kept coming. Our sandbar was shrinking, the island of dry ground getting smaller and smaller. In minutes, we'd be standing in water. And then what? Would it pull us under? Would we drown right there in the middle of the river? I did the only thing I could think of. I shouted at it in every language I knew, Sango, French, Lingala, even a bit of English. I waved the burning branch. I tried to make myself look big, threatening, like you do with a wild animal. The creature didn't react. It just kept staring with those awful blank eyes, water pouring from its mouth, the river rising around us. The water reached my ankles, then my calves. It was cold, much colder than river water should be, and it had a strange, stagnant smell despite the current. Philippe and Antoine were standing on their backpacks now, trying to stay dry, both of them making sounds of panic. That's when I remembered something my grandfather had told me when I was a boy. He'd said there were things in the river older than the crocodiles, older than the hippos. Spirits, he called them, though he might have meant something else. He said they lived in the deepest pools, where the river ran black and still. And he said if you ever met one, there was only one thing to do. Give it something. An offering. I didn't have much. We'd eaten most of our supplies. But I had a knife, a good one, steel blade, bone handle. It had been my father's. I pulled it from my belt, said a quick prayer to whoever might be listening, and threw it into the water at the creature's feet. The knife splashed down and disappeared. For a long moment, nothing happened. The water kept rising. The creature kept staring. Then, slowly, it looked down. One of those impossibly long arms reached into the water and pulled out the knife. The fingers wrapped around the handle, and the creature held it up, examining it like it had never seen such a thing before. The gurgling sound changed, became lower, almost pleased, and the water began to recede. It happened as quickly as it had risen. Within seconds, the water level dropped back to normal, the current resuming its natural flow. The creature stood there for a moment longer, still holding the knife, its blank eyes fixed on us. Then it turned and walked back into the river. Each step took it deeper, waist deep, chest deep, neck deep, until only that elongated head was visible above the surface. Then it was gone, submerged completely, leaving only ripples behind. We stood there in complete silence for maybe 5 minutes, none of us able to move or speak. The river looked normal again, just water flowing past in the twilight, the far bank a dark line of trees, the sandbar solid beneath our feet. Philippe was the first to find his voice. Did that actually happen? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. My whole body was trembling, adrenaline draining away and leaving me weak. I got it on camera, he said, looking down at his equipment with shaking hands. I got all of it. The thing, the water rising, everything. Antoine was sitting on the sand now, head between his knees, breathing hard. We need to leave. Right now? I don't care if it's dark. I don't care about crocodiles. We need to get off this river. Part of me agreed with him. But the rational part of my brain, the part that had been navigating this river for 34 years, knew that traveling at night was suicide. We'd hit a submerged log, or run aground, or drift into a hippopod. The river at night is more dangerous than anything we might meet on a sandbar. We stay until first light, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. We keep the fire big and bright. We don't sleep. And at dawn, we head back downriver as fast as we can paddle. Neither of them argued. We spent the longest night of my life on that sandbar. We burned everything we could, spare clothes, Antoine's camera cases, even one of the paddles. We kept that fire roaring like a beacon, and we watched the river. Around midnight, I saw a movement in the water about 50 meters out. Something large was gliding just beneath the surface, creating a V-shaped wake. It circled our position 3 times, slow, deliberate circles, and then it was gone. At 2 in the morning, we heard the gurgling sound again. It came from upriver this time, echoing across the water. The sound went on for maybe 30 seconds, rising and falling, and then it was answered by another gurgling call from downriver, then another from the opposite bank. There was more than one of them. Philippe's camera had stopped working by then. The memory card was corrupted, he said, though the equipment had been working fine all day. Every frame he'd captured of that creature was gone, just static and digital noise. Equipment failure, he said, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. Must have been the humidity. We didn't talk about it after that. We just sat and watched and waited for dawn. When the sky finally started to lighten in the east, we packed up in frantic silence and pushed the canoe into the water. I've never paddled so hard in my life. We made it back to the village in 4 hours, a trip that should have taken 6. Philippe and Antoine caught the next bus out. Philippe tried to pay me double, but his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his wallet. I told him to keep it. Blood money, I thought, though none of us had bled. Yet, they left, and I didn't expect to hear from them again. But 2 weeks later, Philippe called me. He sounded different. His voice was flat, hollow. The article's been killed, he said. My editor says there's no story. And Marcus, I've been having dreams. Every night, I'm standing in water, and it's rising, and I can't move. And there's something watching me from below. I told him about the Jengu, water spirits the old people talk about. Guardians of the river who take tribute and sometimes take lives. I told him what my grandfather had said, that the river has rules we don't understand and things living in it that were never meant to be seen. The knife saved us, I said. It wanted something, and I gave it something precious. That's the only reason we're alive. But why? Philippe asked. Why did it come to us? What did it want? I didn't have an answer for that. Still don't. After that call, I took a week off. First time in 30 years. I couldn't bring myself to get in the canoe. Couldn't even look at the river without feeling that cold water rising around my ankles. When I finally went back to work, I made changes. I carry offerings now, small things, items of value. A brass bell, silver coins, a steel mirror. And whenever I passed that bend in the river, that spot where we camped, I throw something into the water. An offering. An apology, maybe, for trespassing where we shouldn't have been. The other guides think I'm superstitious now. They laugh when they see me tossing coins into the current. But some of the older men, the ones who've worked this river their whole lives, they don't laugh. They nod. They understand. Because they've seen things too. One of them, a man named Joseph, who's maybe 70 years old, pulled me aside a few months after the incident. "Your grandfather knew?" he said. "He saw one when he was young, didn't he?" I nodded. I'd never asked my grandfather directly, but I'd always suspected from the way he talked about the river. "They've always been here," Joseph continued. "Long before us. The river is theirs. We're just visitors, and sometimes they remind us of that." "What are they?" I asked. "Really?" He shrugged. "The old word is Jengu, but that's just a name we gave them. What they actually are, who knows? The river made them, maybe. Or they made the river. Does it matter? I suppose it doesn't. I still work as a guide. I still take tourists and journalists and fishermen up and down the Sangha. But I'm more careful now. I watch the water more closely. I pay attention to the signs. When the fish stop jumping, when the birds go quiet, when the current changes in ways it shouldn't. And I never, ever camp on that sandbar again. Sometimes, on very still nights when the river is calm and glassy, I see shapes moving beneath the surface. Long, thin shapes that are too big to be fish and move too deliberately to be crocodiles. They glide through the deep channels, passing under my canoe without disturbing the water. I don't point them out to my clients. I just paddle a little faster and say a quiet prayer of thanks when we make it back to shore. The river takes what it wants. The river gives what it chooses. And the things that live in it, the old things, the deep things, they were here first. We're just passing through their world. And sometimes, if we're lucky, they let us pass.